Hello readers, welcome back to Reads with Room B with me, Room B. Today we are going to continue on with our read Gumshoes, The Case of Madison's Father. Chapter 9, Idiot Detective. Unlike Mr. Albert's palatial estate, Madison's grandmother lived in a modest two-bedroom home, which was near to Stuart and Timothy's neighborhoods. She had lived in the same home for most of her adult life, raising her family there. Every deformation, bruise, blemish, and ding in the house held a story to her. Her home was not flashy, but it certainly held a lifetime of character. Madison walked down the creaky wooden stairs of her grandmother's house and heard a gruff voice, the detective who oversaw her father's case, coming from the kitchen. She stopped in her tracks and leaned over the banister, eavesdropping on the conversation between her grandmother and the detective. This is truly delicious pie, Miss Alberts," said the detective. "My wife would kill me if she knew I was off my diet, but between you and me, if she cooked like this, I'd probably be 50 pounds heavier." Madison sneered as she heard the guttural laugh of the detective combined with the piercing cackle of her grandmother's squeal. As the laughing subsided, Madison heard her grandmother take a seat next to the detective. "That's very kind of you, detective. I haven't had a good laugh since, well, you know." Yes'm. You can call me Josiah. I'm afraid I'm not the bearer of very good news, in all honesty." Madison stood on point as she leaned closer, not wanting to miss a word. However, her foot slipped, and all of her weight landed on a broken stair, which let out a mournful creak. Madison's grandmother clambered up. She spoke barely above a whisper, as Madison gingerly crept down the stairs toward the kitchen. "Hush now," she said. "My granddaughter is about ready for school, and if she hears any of this, she'd just fall apart." Madison had heard enough. She leapt down the remaining stairs and stomped into the kitchen. She saw her grandmother sitting across from the detective at the small circular breakfast table, which was covered with a cloth frayed at the edges. Madison's grandmother whipped around toward her. "Good morning, dear. Can I get you some breakfast?" "Why is he here?" Madison said. "You know I don't want him anywhere near me." "Now he's just doing his job. Come to give me an update on the case. And why didn't you tell me? Don't you think I'd like to know how my father's case is progressing?" The detective placed his fork down next to his piece of partially eaten cherry pie and looked up at Madison. For the first thing she saw was that bushy cookie duster mustache that hung over his mouth and hid his jaw. Madison looked at his long, hard face. He did not look like someone who was prone to giving good news. A classic brown fedora rested next to his plate, and the matching trench coat covered the back of his chair. She couldn't resist thinking that the man sitting across from her grandmother was Dan Dash in the flesh, down to the revolver he kept tucked into a shoulder holster. "I think I can answer that," he said. "I know you don't like me, so I was trying to respect that. Maybe I was wrong, but your grandmother and I both thought that was best, given the circumstances." "Well, I heard everything up until now," said Madison. So if you've got something to say about my dad, then I have a right to hear it. But child, I don't want you upset." Her grandmother said. "I'm already upset," said Madison. "My dad's gone. If this man is going to bring him home, then I want to know what he has to say." She folded her arms menacingly. "So, detective, is this what you do? Track down missing people?" "Not most of the time. We're a really small force, so we do just about everything. However, I've tracked down a couple of people in my day." "I see. So where, in your expert opinion, is my father?" The detective took a deep breath and swallowed loudly. His eyes dipped towards the floor. "We don't know." Tears welled up in Madison's eyes. Have you made any progress? As I was about to explain to your grandmother, we have every resource at our disposal to track down your father. But like I said, no, most of the time we are a really small force. So we so all we do is we all do just about everything. However, I have tracked down a couple of people in my day. I see. So your expert opinion, my father is where? The detective took a deep breath. He swallowed loudly, and his eyes dipped towards the floor. We don't know. Tears welled up in Madison's eyes. Have you made any progress? As I was about to explain to your grandmother, we have every resource at our disposal to track down your father. But like I said, we are a very small force. Every piece of evidence has to be sent to an out-of-state lab. Every detective is working 30-plus cases. We just don't have the manpower we need. I promise you that we are doing all we can, but as of right now, we have nothing solid. Madison did not have the strength to look at him for another second. As she turned to leave, he called after her, I will continue to work for your father. I will continue to work for you until your father is found, one way or another. Madison spun back around. What do you mean, one way or another? Poor choice of words. You think there's a chance he could be dead? Absolutely not. But that's what you said. You'll look for him until you find him, one way or another. Which means he could be dead when you find him, right? He stared in silence, nary a comforting word to be found. Right? Madison asked again. I'm afraid that's always a possibility. Well, let me tell you, detective, it doesn't give me a whole lot of comfort if you find my father dead. So, how about you get back to work instead of eating my grandmother's pie? Madison ran out of the room. Her grandmother yanked the detective's pie away before he could take another bite. First day on the job? Because you sure scared my little girl like someone who doesn't have a clue about what he's doing. I hope you're a better detective than you are a conversationalist. Josiah stood, placing the fedora on his head. Me too, was all he could muster. Madison pushed a stack of books into her locker. She could not pretend that today was just another day at school. She could not get the conversation with the detective out of her head. Finally, the anger that had been welling up in her burst out. Tears streamed down her face as she repeatedly pounded her fists against the locker with all the ferocity that she could manage. Finally, her knuckles bleeding, she stopped. After she wiped the tears away, she composed herself. She turned and saw Mr. Reed standing in front of his classroom with a box of tissues. Do you need one? Madison nodded her head and walked into Mr. Reed's empty classroom, grabbing the tissue box from him as she passed. Madison sat in the far corner of the room, as far from prying eyes of students as she could get without falling out the window. Can you turn off the lights, please? I don't want anyone seeing me like this. Mr. Reed flipped the lights off, and Madison cried vigorously into a handful of tissues. She blew her nose and placed the tissues on a nearby desk. Mr. Reed walked over and grabbed them. "I'll take those." Thank you," she said. "You know," Mr. Reed said, "it can be hard enough growing up without having to deal with everything you've had to go through. If you need anything, you can come to me." The bell rang, and the hallway scuffle increased. "Thank you. I appreciate it. I should be going to class." "Are you sure you'll be all right? I can write you a note." "I think we all know I'm not all right," said Madison, "but I'll get by. I don't want any special treatment." Mr. Reed smiled. Madison stood, wiped her sniffing nose on her sleeve, picked up the tissue box. "Can I have these?" Mr. Reed nodded. Madison stuffed the tissue box into her backpack and walked away, flicking the lights on and tossing her used tissues into the trash can. Madison, puffy-eyed but composed, opened her locker and pulled out her books for first period. She slammed the locker closed and in a final fit of anger and looked up to see the smiling faces, well, one smiling and one daydreaming, of Timothy and Stuart. "We have news," said Stuart. "That's wonderful," said Madison, "but I'm late for class already, so you'll have to tell me while we walk." Madison started trotting down the hall, while Stuart and Timothy struggled to keep up. "Slow down, I can't do that," Madison said. "I'm late." Stuart just could not keep up. He stopped, out of breath, and collapsed down to his knees. "We know who did it." Madison stopped. "Why didn't you say something in the first place?" Timothy stepped between them. "I think it's a little presumptuous to say that we found the culprit, but we have what amounts to an excellent suspect." Stuart called out, still on his knees. We finally have something to take to the police. Something real." "No way," Madison said. "I just talked with some idiot detective this morning. The police don't know anything. Tim has more advanced lab than they do. No, we need to give them evidence to arrest this guy immediately. We need evidence." "Great. Let's meet after school. We'll go and track this guy together." Stuart stood. "Not a chance," Madison said. "This is too important to wait another minute. Give me the name. I'm going now." "If you go, I'm coming with you," Stuart said. "Suit yourself," Madison said. "I hope you can keep up." Timothy grabbed Stuart's arm. Stuart struggled to break free. "Are you crazy? You can't just leave school." By the time Stuart had wrestled away from Timothy, Madison was halfway down the hallway and jogging down a flight of stairs. "Try to stop me. It's called being a friend, Tim. Try it sometime." Stuart ran after her. "We have to get some supplies from the lab." "Wait, stop, help." Stuart stumbled as he clutched his side and disappeared down the stairs. "Charlie horse, you're too fast." Timothy turned to see Mr. Reed glaring at him. "Where are those two going in such a rush?" Timothy shrugged. "No idea." And that is Chapter 9 of Gumshoes. Thank you. Be awesome and keep reading, and join me for more next time. Bye, readers.